Thank you, Rania.
I have to go in 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes, I have to.
Thank you very much. I'm Jawad Abbassi. I head the MENA region at the GSMA. The GSMA is effectively the Intaj of the mobile industry. So while Intaj is the association of the ICT companies in Jordan, the GSMA is the global association of the mobile operators across the world, almost 700 mobile operator groups, in addition to around 300 companies in the global ecosystem. The way we're a non-profit organization, we get our membership fees from our members, we have our services, and we have our events, Mobile World Congress, Barcelona coming up February 2023. All of that is plowed back to the benefit of the industry and funding our services and so on. So my slides here are just setting the scene on the global state of the 5G situation based on GSMA intelligence research, our team of analysts across the world. So this is where 5G stands now. So the road to launch a 5G starts with making spectrum available, and we already have 236 operators in 69 markets with 5G spectrum ready to be deployed. Then there are trials, 245 operators in 107 markets doing the trials. Commercial launches, 218 operators in 83 markets. Adoption, 900 million by Q3 2022, and expected to rise to 1 billion by end of 2022. By the way, I have my email at the last slide. You can email me to get all those slides and some more reports from the GSMA intelligence. بالمناسبة بحب المايك هيك عشان بحس حالي زي شادي جميل بحبش regional adoption breakdown. The leader in 5G adoption is North America, followed by Europe. Expected يعني by 2030, 91% in North America, 87% in Europe. In the Arab world, we will be a bit below average, below the global average at 46%, and Sub-Saharan Africa is expected to be only at 16%. This, to echo also what my colleague from Ericsson said, this is how fast 5G has been adopted. So to reach 1 billion users, it took 4 years. For 3G to reach 1 billion users, it took almost 10 years. For 4G to reach 1 billion users, it took over a bit more than 7 years or so. So the 5G is much more has much more faster adoption cycle, primarily because it's deployed in dense urban centers in networks where there was high adoption of 4G and mobile broadband beforehand anyways. And of course, the availability of 5G devices is increasing. So 82 almost brands of handset and models with 5G ready handsets, basically. So 5G is not just about high speed. It's about unleashing a whole. It's a platform for unleashing a whole new set of innovation. One example I would like always to give is that consider what we take for granted now, Netflix on your mobile, Uber, Careem, streaming, gaming, and so on. It would not have been possible without 4G. So on 3G networks, the experience would have been substandard, and that wave of innovation that we've seen only happened because 4G networks were there. This is the promise of 5G. It's basically much lower latency, much higher speeds, and also a network slicing where operators can actually divide the network based on the end demands of the users. And that should unleash a whole new set of innovation across sectors. And this is where the industry is looking at. 5G standalone, okay, when we talk about commercial 5G, there are two types of commercial 5G. Basically hybrid setup where 4G and 5G coexist, and standalone networks with just standalone. It is increasingly being adopted. In total, around 115 operators from 54 countries across every region have launched or demonstrated intent to launch 5G standalone networks. This is a bit of focus on what the mobile industry does in the Middle East and North Africa region. We've generated around 50 billion of economic value in 2021, with operators accounting for the majority of it. Almost 1% of GDP in the Middle East and North Africa region is generated from the mobile industry. And almost 1 million jobs directly created by the mobile industry. Thank you very much for your attention. That's my email, jabbassi@gsma.com. Feel free to email me and I'll share the slides. Now, I believe we have one last presentation and then we'll convene here for a panel and the questions. Is that right, Rania? ولا خلصنا presentations? Okay then. Then please join me on the panel for some questions. Again, thank you for your time and welcome again to the MENA ICT Forum. So I'll start with the general. You've heard each other, and we have the challenger, Rakuten and Open RAN, and the two largest vendors in the world, Ericsson and Huawei, in mobile technology. So any challenges, rebuttals, notes on what you've heard? And we'll start from right to left.
I'm actually not here to challenge or rebut or make any comments about anybody or any company. I'm here to share the knowledge and the experiences that we've had, that I personally had as an individual, working in the mobile and telecom industry all my life, starting out as an R&D engineer. And also to maybe show an alternative to the way we've been doing things over the last 30 years. And I believe this alternative has to come through a complete rethinking from what type of networks we build and how we build them, because that will have a direct correlationship with the opportunities we talked about earlier. Most importantly, cost and speed of rolling out, and the opportunity to open up markets and business potential for innovators, where currently the telecom industry is a locked telecom industry, old boys club, if I may call it. And we need to see more smaller, nimble, younger talent entering this industry and being able to provide technologies and innovations to mobile operators to serve their users better. That's the whole premise behind my early talk.
Thank you. I think it's interesting to hear all the different aspects when it comes to talk about the opportunity in 5G. I think Mr. Rakuten talked a very interesting philosophy, which is totally different from the conventional building a network, where I worked with Ericsson and now work with Huawei. So how is it going to help to build the network to serve the people? When come to me, and your philosophy suggests that everyone should have right to the internet access, democratizations, everything, cloudification. And I always say it's general, the direction is a lot of operators trying to travel. But what I'm going to say, when it comes to the network, to protect the consumer's right and to access the internet, to have the performance, you need to have a stable network. and you need to make sure your network performance, availability can meet the standard. The second thing we come to the different philosophy approach, I would just say, is your organization ready for this? Will you be able to manage such a drastic transformation? At the same time, you ensure the performance of this. Having the internet access also, particularly with the 5G, is so many different digital services, which means are your data secure on the internet, on your network? So security is very important. The last, not the least, is about sustainability. Is your network that can provide the kind of efficiencies Zoran presented with the 5G, different technologies. Can you really save the energy? Can you use the AI in your network to enable the massive deployment, but with less energy consumptions across the country? So that's the four things I would take.
Thank you. Now I would share something which I think if you speak to any operator who already has 5G, and here in GCC, Middle East, we have some operators, as I said, which is first deploying 5G. If you ask them, do they have a challenge with 5G? They said, yes, we have to monetize. I think that's the challenge which all of us is really sharing. And what we think, what is the key here, is really to play on this flexibility with 5G is offering. 5G is built for industry. It should be flexible. It should be that all these APIs which we can expose to development industry, to designers, to design application. If application is designed in US or in China, that it will work also here in UAE. From Ericsson, we are working on our part to do this. We are developing something which we call Global Network Platform. We recently purchased Vonage. They have over 1 million developers, and that's what we are planning to bring in the market. It's already there, but you're going to see a lot of from next year. So I think that's what we need. We need really to support industry, support operators to monetize on 5G. Regardless, is it open, run, purpose-built line? I think this is secondary question.
Thank you, Zoran. A follow-up question to you, Zoran. In countries where 5G has not been deployed yet, or in countries where it has been deployed on a limited scale, what can be done by policymakers, by operators, by the whole ecosystem to speed up 5G deployments?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I would say three things. First thing is frequency. Second thing is frequency. And third thing you can assume it's frequency. His Excellency was saying that operators here are getting mid-band, 3.5, everybody, each operator 100 megahertz, which is fantastic. This is how it starts. This is how end users will see the benefits. 100 megahertz for 5G, majority of operators also here globally, they don't have probably 50, 60 megahertz for any other technology. So this will make the difference. And this is a great start. But it's also very important to have low band frequencies. This is the frequencies which are below 1 gigahertz. If we want to provide country-wide coverage, we cannot do this without low frequencies. It was mentioned that we are starting with non-standalone. That's logical. That's the first technology. But tomorrow we're going to move to standalone. We need low band frequencies for standalone to enable that we have coverage. There is no 4G to help standalone for this coverage. I think here in Jordan we have great opportunity because here 700 megahertz band, 800 megahertz band is not utilized. So this is fantastic opportunity to utilize these bands to enhance, I would say, 4G, but definitely to deploy 5G. And I was saying frequency, 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 and the third frequency is at the end, we're going to use all frequencies for 5G. So even those frequencies which are used today for 4G, 1800 megahertz, 2100 megahertz, all this will be converted to 5G.
Thank you very much. Rabih, I have a question on ORAN, and for the audience, ORAN stands for Open Radio Access Network. What's the potential for job creation in middle-income countries like Jordan with abundant, and Egypt and Lebanon and so on, with an abundant supply of young software engineers?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question, Jawad. And thank you for calling me Rabih and not Mr. Rakuten. I wish I was Mr. Rakuten, actually, because Mr. Rakuten has about $6 billion in his bank account. Ms. Lee, this is just a joke. Thank you for... My name is Rabih, though. So what does Open RAN bring? I mean, just like if you think about it, in the old days, most institutions and companies used something called a mainframe computer, and I don't know how many in the audience know what mainframe computer is. I'm sure the panelists do, and let's call them dinosaurs, I'm among them. But what Open RAN does is, and we've seen this in our environment in Japan, because the radio access network became very standardized, and it basically runs as software. The only thing that you need to introduce on top of that software is the radio antennas and the radio units. So what we observed in our environment, Jawad, and dear audience, is we actually were able to deploy radios and antennas from 13 different companies. And some of them are so small, they are an organization of 25 people. And we've also deployed radios from Nokia and others as well. So if you see this, you see a democratization that encourages young talent to start coming up with ideas, establishing their own companies, and entering this world that has been locked to a handful of vendors for decades. Actually, 20 years ago, it used to be better. Mobile World Congress would have 15, 16 vendors. Now they're on there. The second thing that it'll bring, for example, we have every intention to come to Jordan, establish ourselves in Jordan, and establish an R&D hub in Jordan. And that brings an opportunity for this extremely capable young talent who graduates from universities here and aspires to leave the country, because the big jobs and the big research is happening outside the region. We want to see more people staying in the nation and supported by companies like us who are on the extreme bleeding edge of technical innovation to bring those capabilities here, because once they learn, they will also establish their own companies and not just serve Jordan and the Middle East region, they will serve the world. The world is becoming more and more democratized. Unfortunately, the telecom supply chain has not been broken down and gotten democratized. And 5G brings a perfect opportunity for it, because it's now possible to diversify the supply chain of that network.
Thank you, Rabih. We are out of time, but I will exercise my moderator prerogative to actually take two questions from the audience. So, yes, please, the gentleman. Your name, please. No, we can't hear you.
Should be an on button on it.
أو صيح خلاص.
Hello, yes. My name is Tawalbe. I'm Vice President for Dimension Systems. My question is to Rabih, and I'm sure that Ericsson and as well. Now, 5G is a great, and we know that, how much, and the presentation was absolutely perfect. As we all know, 6G is under development in the world, US, Japan, China. So what is 6G comparing to what you have explained about the 5G, and how far are we from 6G from now?
It's a good question. And you know, I want to move away from this G. It should be any G goes, right? Because as a mobile operator, you should build a foundation that allows you to provide any generation of radio network. And we've seen this starting to come in with Wi-Fi becoming deployed in mobile networks and telco networks in the 3G, 4G transition, and now it's proliferated. So in fact, I'm both a UAE user, mobile user, as well as a US and Japan. And my experience differs significantly from one network to the other. In some cases, I could use voice over Wi-Fi, for example. In other cases, I can't. So what 6G brings, in addition, is the ability for you to integrate new radios and new radio frequency, regardless whether it's regulated on or non-regulated, onto a common platform that serves the users. And there's enhancements that come with every generation. For example, it's not just the capacity and speed that I mentioned earlier that 5G brings. There is a lot of other enhancements in security, in the ability to become greener and more sustainable, as Zoran was talking and focusing in his speech on. So every time we move from one generation to the other, there is incremental improvement and expansion and the capabilities of what you offer. Unfortunately, today, the standard is not ready, nor the radios and the environments are ready for 6G, and therefore, I believe 5G is a necessary transition. And typically, we go through decades of cycles in these technologies. Good question, though.
Please, any comments on that?
Yes, just to add on what Mr. Rabih said, the 6G standard obviously is still in the early stage trying to be defined. Although the industry consensus already started to looking at the 5G advance, or as I presented, the 5.5G advance, which could give you a glimpse of what's the potential in the 6G going to happen from a technology perspective. So in general, there'll be more spectrum band to make available, particularly in the millimeter wave spectrum band. And with that, of course, there will be significant challenges how you overcome the propagation problems. The other part of that is also the connectivity part of that, how you can use the things like red cap is already part of the standard. And also, furthermore, we are pushing for the passive IoT. That's to enable the cost of the devices will go down. So enable the connectivity to become 100 billion. So at the moment, it's about 1.3 billion IoT connectivity. Is a significant lower than expected. The main reason is the limitation on the different standard for the last mile connectivity and the power consumption on the NB-IoT devices. And furthermore, you can looking at the sensing type of technology, which is also going to become part of the 6G, what we hope, part of 6G technology, which in different sensing, you get the accurate positioning and the image visualization. Of course, there are other things being discussed, different techniques being used, and to ensure all band spectrum can be used, the efficiencies of that, the paper being written. But in general, is still the whole industry coming onto a consensus about that, and to formulating the features and user cases. You probably were talking about the time scale about 2030, and in terms of what is it going to be like for the 6G.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, so Zoran, in 30 seconds or less, please.
Yes, we will be very short. Of course, our research team are working in full speed for 6G to come in 2030 timeframe. And I had the privilege that I was on panel this morning about metaverse. And that's going to be a big part of 6G. We call it a little bit different. We call it continuum between physical and cyber world. So that completely continuous physical and cyber world, that is what 6G needs to enable us, to build a network around this metaverse and that continuum.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Please, a warm applause to our panelists.